How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf. What Daf should we study today? What is this? Okay. Today we're going to study Daf Peiches of Masechta BavaBasra. Daf Peiches of Masechta BavaBasra. The things we got a lot to do on Daf Pezayin, Amud Beis, and we're going to get to Daf Peites. So we got some work to do, but it's going to be Mamash Gewalt. The first part of the Daf is like, you're gonna have to work. We're gonna have to work through it. The second part, it gets a little bit second party. Okay, fine. It's the morning. It was at 5 in the morning, almost. I got coffee, which is nice. Mamash Gewalt. All right, here we go. Daf Pezayin Amud Beis. At the Mishnah, Hasheleach es benoi eitzel chenvani gewaldig. Umodad lo be'isser shemen v'nosen lo es ha'isser. Shibas atzloiches vavad es ha'isser. Chenvani chayev. Rabbi Yehuda poter sh'amanaskein sholchoi. Umodem chacham de Rabbi Yehuda b'zman she'atzloiches be'aratinoik. Umodad chenvani l'socha she'chenvani poter. Mamash gewalt. All right. Let's start again. Hashaleach es beno eitzel chenvani. So a father, okay, sends his son, his yingel, it sounds like he's a cotton. Alright, this little yingel. He sends his little yingel with, so he sends his yingel to a oil monger to buy oil. Now, the father sends the yingel with a pundian. A pundian. Who remembers what a pundian is? A pundian is 2 isars. So be'etzem, the oil costs 1 isar, right? So it costs 1 isar, but he sends it with a pundian, and he'll buy the oil, and he'll get an isar's worth of change because there's 2 isars in a pundian. So he sends it with a pundian, and he's going to buy 1 isar's worth of oil, and he'll get an isar of change. And be'etzem, the shaila is how exactly is the oil going to get back home? Okay, that's the shaila. It's machlekes chacham and Rabbi Yehuda. But be'etzem, that's what's going on. A father sends his yingel with some money and possibly a flask to buy some oil from the oil monger, and then things kind of get a little bit, things break and whatever. So again, hashaleach es beno eitzel chenvani. So if a father sends his yingel to an oil monger, umodad lo be'isser, and the oil monger measures him out be'isser shemen, 1 isser's worth of oil, v'nosen lo es ha'isser, and gives the yingel an isser of change. Shiberes atzloiches, if the jug breaks, the avad es ha'isser, so if the jug breaks, meaning so be'etzem, the yingel went, he bought the oil and got the change, and then the jug breaks. So the shaila is whose loss is it? Meaning the jug breaks, the oil is gone, and he loses the isser, the money. So chenvani chai. So according to the Tanakama, the oil monger is responsible, right? It was against his better judgment to trust the yingel with the money, with the jug, with the oil. So according to the Chacham, the oil monger is liable. Rabbi Yehuda poter, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says the oil monger is not liable. The father has to swallow the loss. Shamanaskin sholchot. That is why, meaning the father sent the yingel to buy this stuff, and he understands the risk involved in sending a little yingel to the store. He might lose the money, he might break the jug, lose the oil. But the idea was that the yingel was sort of responsible for it, and the father was taking that risk. Umodim Chacham Rabbi Yehuda, the Chachamim, however, agree with Rabbi Yehuda, that if the jug is still with the yingel, and the oilmonger measured oil into the jug while the yingel was holding it, that the oilmonger will be potter for the jug. Meaning, according to the Chacham, it'd still be chayev for the loss of the oil, for the loss of the money. The oilmonger would be chayev for that, but for the jug itself, if the yingel was holding it and the oilmonger poured into the jug and then the jug broke, the oilmonger would be potter for that. And the Gemara is going to explain kind of what exactly the machlokes is between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda, the jug, whatever, all these inyanim. It's a little bit subtle, this first part of the Gemara, but then we start getting into other things that, I think the next few days are going to be okay. Well, I mean, whatever, they're going to be what they're going to be. Okay. Let's look at the Gemara. It says the Gemara, Bishloma be'isar v'shemen. Okay, so I understand the machlokes between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda with regard to the money, with regard to the oil that gets, right, the money that gets lost, the oil that gets ruined. So, b'ha pligi. This is the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanna Kama. The Rabbanon Savre, that the rabbis hold, lo du'e shadre, that the rabbis hold, that of course the father was not going to, the father recognizes that he's sending a little yingel. Lo du'e shadre. The father sent the yingel to the oilmonger to let the oilmonger know that he, the father, is interested in buying oil, and that the oilmonger should send his delivery guy with the oil. Send the delivery guy with the oil, with the change. Don't entrust a little yingel with oil and with change. So the father was sending the yingel to basically let the oilmonger know that he, the father, is interested in buying oil, but that the oilmonger obviously should not trust the little yingel, should send his delivery guy with the money, with the oil. Rabbi Yehuda savar l'shadure le shadre, whereas Rabbi Yehuda holds that no, the father sent his son on a mission for him to go and buy oil and bring it back home, and therefore the oilmonger had no responsibility, and therefore he's potter according to Rabbi Yehuda. Elashibet slochis, the shayle though that the Gemara has is with regard to the jug. With regard to the oil, with regard to the change, okay, so I understand the machlokas, but with regard to the jug, aval shibet slochis avei midasi. But with regard to the jug, that, the father needs to sort of own up to that. Meaning he sent a little yingel with a jug. That's just pashut irresponsible. The second that he sent that jug with the yingel, he basically forfeited any claim to that jug. He's sending a jug on a mission with a little yingel. You have to assume it's going to come back in 20 pieces. And therefore, I don't understand why the Chacham would say, says the Gemara, I don't understand why the Chacham would say that the oilmonger should be chayev for the broken jug. It was the father who was irresponsible, Darton. Excuse me, I'm going to drink a sip of coffee. So, Amr Rav Yishaya, says Rav Yishaya, Acha bebal habayis mocher tzlochius askinon. Well, here we are talking about the father is take a tzlochius monger. He sells tzlochiuses. So here we're talking about where the father is a tzlochius monger. So uchigon shenot lechen voni amanas levakro. And the oil monger, so the father, the tzlochius monger, sent a tzlochius with his yingel to the oil monger. The oil monger, upon seeing the tzlochius, he picked it up to have a look at it. So mistame, the father is a tzloichius monger, and you have be'etzem somebody who's having a look at the tzloichius. Where am I? And it's like Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel, it says Shmuel, that if somebody takes a vessel from a craftsman and he's having a look at it, maybe figure out if he's going to buy it or not, and some kind of onus happens, it slips out and smashes into 20 pieces, chayiv. So the checker with this fellow is going to be responsible. So therefore, that's what we're talking about, that the father is a tzloichius monger, and he sent the tzloichius with his son to buy oil. The oil monger is now picking up the tzloichius and having a look at it, I guess ostensibly, perhaps to buy it. Well, at that point, he's responsible for what happens to it. And that's why, according to the Chachamim, the oil monger would be responsible, would be chayiv. Where are we? So, frag die Gemara, leme de Shmuel Tanoi. So does that mean that Shmuel's statement is taka not l'chol hadeis? Shmuel made a statement that's actually a machlokes? That the Chacham, right? Because Rabbi Yehuda is saying that even though the oil monger picked it up, he's still going to be patur. So it sounds like he doesn't. Shmuel's statement would be inconsistent with Rabbi Yehuda. So are we saying therefore that Shmuel his statement is actually not globally accepted? It's taka only according to the Chachamim. Where am I? Ela Rab of Rav Yosef Damir Tavayu, rather Rab and Rav Yosef say, here the oil monger is not just an oil monger, he's oichid a tzloichis monger. Okay. He's a tzloichius monger. Vaz Rabbi Yehuda the time of Rabbanan the Taimayu. And therefore, be'etzem, the father was sent, so the father didn't send the tzloichius. The father sends the yingul on a mission. Go buy me oil and bring home the change. Now, the oil monger doesn't just sell oil, he also sells the jugs. He's oichet a tzloichius monger. So now it's the same machlokes. Kilu, according to the Rabbanon, what the father was saying was, go tell the oil monger that your father wants oil, and have him send the oil in one of his jugs with the change with his delivery guy. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the mission was that the yingul was going to bring all the things back. If that's the case, I'll say the Sefer Moedim Chacham Rabbi Yehuda, that the Chacham, however, agree with Rabbi Yehuda, Bizman she'atzlochis bi'ad hatinok, that if the yingul is holding the jug, umadad chedvani lesocha, and the oil monger measures the oil into the jug while the yingul is holding it, shechamvani potter, that the chamvani would be potter, but why? Why should the chamvani be potter? Meaning, according to this, the oil monger also sells tzloichiuses. Now, according to the Chachamim, the father sent the yingul to be'etzim let this monger know that he should send back with his delivery guy oil in a jug with the change. Why? According to that approach, according to the Chachamim, why should the yingul ever be touching the tzloichius? And why, if the yingul is holding it, would the oil monger be potter if the tzloichius breaks? Why should the monger ever have given anything to the yingul? So that part doesn't really make sense. Elo, Abai bar Ovin, Rab Chanina bar Ovin, Damir Tavayu. Abai bar Ovin, Chanina bar Ovin say, Hochav ma'iskin, here we're talking about kigon shenot lo lamud ba. So rather, we are not talking about a father who's a tzloichias manger. We're not talking about a oil monger who's a tzloichias manger. No. Talking about the father. One second. Yeah, okay. Yeah, alright. Yeah. So Be'etzem, the father sent his yingel together with the flask in order to buy oil. Now he's not a tzloichias monger, but he sent a jug with his son to buy oil. And then the oil monger took the jug from the yingel in order to measure oil into it. It's like Rabba, the Amar Rabba that says, Rabba, Hikisha nischayev ba. That if you have, for example, we learned this in BavaBasra, that if you have a zokin ve'en lefi chvoidoi, that if you have, right, by a shavas aveda, if you have a person who's a zokin, he's an older person, and it's not bekovidik for this old person to have to go bend down and pick up this lost object and figure it out and return it. So he can kind of, he gets a free pass. But the kish of makal, he finds like an animal that's lost. A seir nidachim. And he gives it a zetz, he gives it a hit. Well, then it's chayv. Well, at that point, so even though he was potter milchatchila, but once he gives it a zetz, so then he's chayav for Ashavas Aveda. So here, oichit, once the oil monger takes the jug from the yingel, well then he's going to be responsible for it. But one second, I'll say that Rabba's statement is by animals. The ankotinu nigra braiso, that once he gives the animal a zetz, he taught the animal something, to run away, to run far away. What does Rashi say? Rashbam say, an animal, by giving it a zetz, you kind of training it now to run away. So yeah, at that point he's now responsible because he just kind of like, made a shtickle mess that now the animal's going to want to run away and be kind of, kind of wired to do that. But in this case, we're talking about a jug. By the oil monger picking up the jug to measure in it, doesn't train the jug to do anything new. So why should the oil monger be responsible for picking up the jug to measure in it? Elama Rava rather says Rava, that I and the lion of the group explained that. And who is that? It's Reb Zeire. Interesting. We had this Gemara in Masechta Shabbos. I always remember that there was Reb Chia Bar Oven. Was the Arisha B'Chabur. I think the people outside are making noise. 1 second. Maybe not. I don't know. They were making a lot of noise for a few hours. But you know what I say. I put in my noise cancelling headphones and I go weiter. Here what are we talking about? Well, here it's talking about where the oil monger took the jug in order to measure for other people. So now all of a sudden he's using the father's jug for his own purposes to measure out oil for other people. That's already like, wait, why are you using the father's jug for other people? Did the father give you permission for that? The shaila is, how do we treat, the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is, how do we treat a shoyel shaloi midas, somebody who's borrowing something without asking, without the father's knowledge? The oil monger is borrowing it so that he can measure for other people. So myself is shoyel ave. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, he's a borrower. So he's borrowing this jug in order to measure out for other people. And when he gives it back to the yingel, and it's still whole, it's not broken at all, so at that point he returns it to the yingel, he's off the hook. Whereas the Chacham say, no, he's considered a thief, and therefore he's not going to be off the hook until that jug gets safely back to the father. but up until then he's responsible, and that's why he's going to be chayiv if it breaks. But if the yingel is still holding it, and the oil monger never, poured anything, never took it from the yingle's still holding it, and he poured the oil directly into the jug while the yingle's holding it, well then the chachamim will agree that the oil monger will be potter for the flask in that case, so he would still be chayiv for the oil and for the change. Shmuel said earlier, Anoitel kli min ha'omin levakov v'nenos biyado chayiv. Shmuel had said that if somebody takes a vessel from a craftsman and he's checking it out, ostensibly to see if he's interested in purchasing it, so if it breaks, he's going to be chayiv. That is if the price of the item is a fixed known price. So at that point, it's not like he doesn't know how much it costs and he's got to decide, is it going to be worth it? He knows the price in advance. So what business does he have picking it up? He's picking it up just to kind of look at it, and the only thing that's left to be done is to make a decision whether he's going to buy it or not. But that's about it. So if at that point he it breaks, so then he's going to be chayiv. But if there's, he doesn't know it's not something that has a fixed price, well then it's not, then he's not going to be chayiv for that. However, there was a fellow who went to the butcher, Agba atma de bisra, and he took a thigh of meat, baide dika Agba also parosho marma mine, and while he was holding this thigh of meat, a horse rider, I guess, came and chapped it aran and rid off into the sunset. Also, the comment of Yemer. So now the case came before Yemer, chayve the shalume demei, and he required this fellow, this buyer, to pay for the meat that got wrested from him. He picked up some meat, it got stolen from him, and Rav Yemer says that this buyer is responsible to pay back the butcher. That's again, that is if this was meat that had a fixed price on it. So again, he picks it up knowing exactly what it costs, and he just needs to kind of make a decision if he's going to buy it or not. So that's why it'd be chayiv. But if he doesn't actually know how much it costs yet, so then it would be potter. There was a fellow who brought gourds to Pum Naira. And everybody came, they were chapping gourds aran. So now everybody's chapping his gourds. And so he doesn't, how's he supposed to, it's a mess. Everybody's taking his gourds. How's he supposed to get his money? It's absolute balagan. You know what he says? He says to them, Harein mukdoshin hashamayim. They're all hektish. They're all hektish. Nobody can get any benefit from these gourds. That's it. They're all hektish. Also, the coming to Avkana, they came for Avkana. He says to them, Eino the maktish dova shenu shelo. You can't be maktish them because they're not yours. Now that's only the case if they have a fixed price. So again, once they pick them up, they made a kinyan, nobody can be choser at that point. So therefore, he cannot be maktish them. But if they don't have a fixed value, well then, picking them up is not going to make a kinyan on them. And Bershus Marayu Kaime B'Shaper Aktish, and they remain in the seller's domain, and he can be makdish them in that case. So if you have a chaver who's buying vegetables, produce from a amaretz, okay, so you have somebody who's buying produce from us, so it's demai be'etzim. It's demai, which means that once the chaver buys the produce from the amaretz, he's going to have to separate maisris. Uvir ve'eniach. And he's like people do at the fruit shop. They pick one up, have a look at it, see if it looks good, put it down, pick up a different one, have a look at it, So even if he's doing this all day long, picking up one, putting it down, picking up another, saying it's good, that one's bad, I'll take that one, whatever. So let's say he's like picking them up and putting them down, lo kana. Picking up and putting down the produce does not make a kinyan on it. Of course, the big nafkamina being that once there's a kinyan, once he can't be choser, he's going to be chayiv to separate maisis because it's demai. So if he's not Kohen, so then there's no chiyuv, he doesn't have to separate maasers for it. But once he already makes a kinyan on it, so then there's a chiyuv to separate maasers. V'lo neschayv b'maaser, and he's not going to be chayiv in maaser if he's just putting them, picking them up, putting them down. Gomer belibo liknoso, but once he decides in his heart that he's going to buy it, well then kono, he's kono v'neschayv b'maaser, and he's going to be chayiv in maaser. So now here's the thing. Lachziru yevsher. Now he can't return it to the produce monger. Shekvan is chayiv b'maaser, because it's already chayiv in maaser. Because once he made up in his heart to buy it, it's going to be chayiv maaser. He can't just give it back to the Am Haaretz because he hasn't yet separated maaser. V'la'aso yevsher, and he also can't separate maaser and give it back. Shekvar mafchisan b'damim, because then he's giving back less than what he took. Haketzad maaser. So what does he do? Haketzad. What does he do? Ma'aso, he separates maaser, v'nosin lo dmei maaser. So what he should do is, if he wants to return the produce, he has to separate maaser, because he already decided in his heart to buy it. So he has to separate maaser, and what he does is, he gives back the remaining produce, the 90%, he gives that back, and the 10% maaser that he separated, he gives the value, he pays in money that value. Auto mishum de gomer belibo liknos kana. What, just because he decided in his heart that he's going to buy it, so now it's considered his and he needs to separate maasers just because of a decision in his heart? Here we're talking about a God-fearing individual like Rav Safra, who is mekayim in his soul, that he speaks truth in his heart. Givaldik, the Rashbam says a ma'aseh with Rav Safra that one time somebody came to buy his business, and he was saying Kriya Shema at the time, so he didn't respond. So the potential buyer figured Rav Safra is not responding because I'm not offering. It's not shaykh to respond. I'm not offering enough. So he kept on increasing the price that he's willing to pay for the gesheft. And when Rav Safra finished saying Kriya Shema, he accepted the original lowest price because he would have accepted it. He gomer belibo. In his heart, he would have accepted the first price, so therefore that's what he accepted, even though the buyer was increasing the price, because he thought that Rav Safra, was intimating, I think that's a word, that the offers were too low. And therefore he kept increasing the price, but Rav Safra accepted the original lowest price, because really, he would have accepted that, just that he was saying Kriya Shema. Says the Mishnah, Siton mikaneach midosov echad shloshim yom. A wholesaler needs to clean out his measures every 30 days. So the law, the kind of the idea, according to the Tanna Kamma, is because he's selling often. So he's got to make sure that his measures are nice and clean, so that there's nothing stuck in there and he's not ripping anybody off. But a BavaBasra who's not selling, doesn't sort of need the measures as often. So it's enough if you just check them once a year, make sure generally speaking they are accurate, and that is enough. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Punk Fakir. A wholesaler who is selling things all the time, there's a lot of turnover with his measures. And therefore, he has to clean them out less often. As opposed to BavaBasra, who's not using the measures as much, and therefore there's a lot of time for whatever's in there to congeal, to get stuck to it, and the measures are not really measuring the correct thing. So BavaBasra needs to clean out the measures every 30 days. A wholesaler actually once a year would be enough, because generally speaking there's so much turnover that things aren't really getting, kind of dried out and stuck in there. Chenvoni mikaneach midos pamayim b'Shabbos, and a store owner cleans out his measures twice a week. Okay, fine. Right, so the Rashbam says, and this would be according to the Tanna Kamma and according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, So even though a chenvani, a storekeeper, has a lot of turnover, still everybody agrees that he needs to clean out his measures twice a week because, so Rashbam says, because since the wholesaler needs to have those 3 drips that we talked about in the previous, 2 Mishnahs ago, about like having those drips at the end to make sure everything drips out. But a storekeeper, we said, because right, what did the Tanakhama say over there? He said, he doesn't need to do that, so therefore stuff is kind of getting stuck at the bottom more. So therefore, twice a week he needs to clean out his measures. All right. And he needs to clean his weights once a week, right? Because the weights are how you know how much you're buying, right? If you're buying a kilo of something and you have, kilo weights, so you got to make sure, or 100-gram weights, whatever they are, 500-gram weights. So you have to make sure that those are the proper weight. And so if you have a scale, so at Shuk Machne Yehuda, the scales are different. They're electric scales. But back in the day, there must be places in the world that they still do it like this, but a scale would be'etzim be, it's going to be shaykh in tomorrow's daf, but be'etzim a scale, you would have 2 kind of trays. You'd have like a balancing thing with a tray on either side. And let's say you're buying meat, you would put the meat on one side, and then you would put weights on the other side, and you'd keep on adding weight until the scale is balanced on both sides, and that's how you know how much the meat weighs, and based on that you would pay price per kilo or whatever it is. So where am I? So these trays that you would put stuff up, you'd have to wipe clean the trays between each weighing to make sure that there's nothing on the trays that would be weighing it down on either side. Shimon Gamliel says that this is for moist measures. But if it's a dry measure that isn't really getting stuck or anything, nothing's really sticking around, so then you don't need to wipe down the trays between each weighing, because stuff isn't really getting stuck like that. Excuse me, coffee. And you need to weigh it down at tefach. The Gemara says that that's going to be in a place where the minig is. But be'etzem is like a baker's dozen, right? You throw in that extra bagel. So be'etzem, if you're, let's say, buying meat, so they wouldn't balance the scales exactly. They would actually make it a little bit heavier on the meat side, i.e. you'd throw in a little bit extra. You throw it a little bit extra and call it a kilo, even though it's a little bit more. But if he was balancing the scale, well then nosilo gerumin, well then you should still throw in a shtickle extra. 1/10 for liquid, 1/20 for dry stuff. The Gemara is going to explain what that means. It doesn't mean 1/10. Malkum Shana, we're going to see what it means in the Gemara. Malkum Shana gulamud bedaka lo yimdod begasa, begasa lo yimdod bedaka, limchok lo yigdosh, ligdosh lo yimchok. So a place where the minig is to use small measures, don't use big measures. Big measures don't use small measures. Meaning, so let's say you're buying a sa'a is 6 kavs. A sa'a is 6 kavs. So in a place where the minig was that the measure that they would use was a sa'a, so don't use kavs, right? So if somebody orders a sa'a of wheat, or I don't know, a sa'a of beer, okay? Well, no, are kavs? Wait, are kavs specifically dry? Maybe you get to like loaves when it comes to liquids. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so what? Flour. Let's say flour. Okay, you're buying flour. So a sa'a of flour. So the thing is, when you, right, as we're about to say, right, as the next thing says, right, limchok lo yigdosh, ligdosh lo yimchok, right, that if the minig is to be mochek, to like even out the measure so that there's no extras. Well then, so if the minig is to even it out, so then don't be godesh, don't make it a heaping measure. If the minig is that it should be a heaping measure, don't even it out. So the point is that every time you scoop up some flour, there's going to be a shtickle extra. There's going to be a bit of a heap. So therefore, if the minig is to measure out in kavs, right, where each kav is a sixth of a sa'ah, so then each time you scoop it out, there's going to be a shtickle heap, which means, right, the whole would be less than the sum of its parts, right? That because if you only have one sa'ah, you only get one heap, right? So if you take a sa'ah measure and you scoop out a sa'ah of flour, so you get one heap. But if you take 6 kavs and you scoop out 6 times, you get 6 heaps. So you're going to end up getting more. So therefore, if the minig is to use the larger measure, don't use smaller measures. If the measure is to use smaller measures, don't use the larger measure. Okay. So again, so Mokum Shanagu Lamud Bedaka, Laimud Begas. If the minig is to use smaller measures, don't use a larger measure, because then the buyer gets less. Begas Laimud Bedaka. If the minig is to use a larger measure, don't use a smaller measure, because then the seller loses more. Limchok lo yigdosh ligdosh limchok. If the minig is to even out the measure, don't heap it. If the minig is to heap it, don't even it out. Says the Gemara Menani Mili. How do we know that you weigh down? Right. We said v'chayv lachriya lo tefach, that you weigh down the scale a tefach to the benefit of the buyer. You give him a little bit more. You weigh down his side. Menani Mili Amar Ishlakish says Ishlakish Amar Kakish. The pasuk says Evan Shleim of Tzedek. It says you should have a complete and righteous weight, stone. Tzadek mishalcha v'tein lo, righteous weight from yours, and give him extra. Yach, if that's the case, ema seifa. But then it says right after hayashokalo ayin ba'ayin nosin lo gerumin, that if he was balancing the scale, well then he throws in a little bit extra. But how could he balance the scale v'achra de'iraisa? But if we're saying that it comes from a pasuk in the Torah that you have to sort of weigh, tilt the scale, so then how can you even out the scale if you need to tilt it? Rather, the ratio with the tilting of the scale is where that's the minig. If the minig is to tilt the scale, so then tilt the scale. And when Rish Lakish says his pasuk, it is on the seifa, that if he was balancing the scale, well then no sin no gerumav, then you should throw in a shtickle extra on your own. How do we know this? Amar Rish Lakish says, the pasuk says, but tzedek mishalcha v'tein lo, that give him a shtickle extra. V'chama gerumin, what is the shtickle extra? Amar Abba bar Mamel, Amar Rav echod me asara belitra bilach la asara litrin. So if you have 1/10, so if we're talking about liquid measures, 1/10 of a litra when you have 10 litras, so 1/100, right? If you have 10 litras, so 1/10 of one of them, so 1/100. Okay. So we're not talking about throwing so much. Throw in a shtickle. All right. I mean, a baker's dozen is 13 out of 12. That's like, I don't know, what's that, like 8% or something? That's a lot. Right, you're throwing in, I guess, an extra. Oh gosh, so this comes to milra or levar, but yeah, but I guess it's like an extra. It's like 8% or something like that. So that's a lot. This is 100. So we're not talking about. I guess that's 1%. So we're not talking about that much. Okay, where are we? So we said 1/10, which you said is 100th for liquid measures, and 1/20th for dry measures. They asked, Heichi ka'amar, what exactly are we saying? Echod me'asar belach, la'asara dilach. So are we saying 1/100th for liquid? The echod me'esrim biyavish la'esrim diyavish, and for dry it would be 1/400th, right? Meaning 1/10 of one when there are 10, which is 100, and also 1/20th of one when there are 20, which is 1/400. Or maybe 1/10 of one for when there are 10 for liquids, which is 100, or 1/10 of one when there are 20 for dry, which is 1/200. So is the one 400, the one 200? Teku, ich weiß nicht. Amr Reb Levi says, Reb Levi, Koshe onshan shel midos yoser me onshan shel arayis, that the punishment for being dishonest with measures, with scales, with measures, is more significant than the punishment for inappropriate relations. That by arayis it says el, but by midos it says ele. My mashmadai el kashu. I don't know that el is a lashon of strength. That he took the strong ones of the land. Kabi arayis nami oksiv ele, but by arayis it also says ele. Hahulimute midis mikaris. Well, when it says ele by arayis, these, it's to say that these you're chayiv karis for, but you're not chayiv karis for midis. Well, if you're chayiv karis for arayis and you're not chayiv karis for midis, then how could it be that the punishment for midis is worse? Well, the hasam efshir b'tshuva achalo efshir b'tshuva. The difference is by arayis you can do tshuva, but by ripping off your friend you can never fully do tshuva, especially if you're ripping off the public, right? You're a monger, and people are coming all the time and monging from you. So then, wait, if a monger, the monger mongs, monging, right? The monger and the monger, the monger and the mongor, yeah, right, so the mongers and and then you have the mongors. So anyways, so where am I? So so if you have a monger who's mongering to everybody, so who you can never really do tshuva from that. V'amar Reb Levi says, Reb Levi, kasha gezel hedget yosem gezel gavoya. It's worse to steal from people than to steal from God. Shezektim chet lemila, because in the pasuk by stealing from your friend, it first mentions the sin, and then, right, what does it say? It says, Nevish ki secheta umala mal b'Hashem v'kichesh b'amito, whereas by me'ila by God, it says, ki simol ma'al v'chata b'shkaga, right? So by the hedjit, it says, the sin first, and then the me'ila v'zeg, the me'ila l'chet, but by stealing from, me'ila from God, it says me'ila first, and then the sin. V'amar Reb Levi, says Reb Levi, come and see that the way of God is not like the way of the people. God blessed the Yidden with all 22 letters of the alphabet, of the Aleph base, but cursed them with 8 letters of the alphabet. How do we know that God blessed the Yidden with the 22 letters of the alphabet? Me'im, starting with Aleph, b'chukosai, ad kama mius, until Tov. So me Aleph ad Tov. Was it Aleph Beis, Gimel Dalet Hey, Vav Zayin Ches Tes Yud, Chaf Lamed, Mem Nun Samach, Ayin Pei, Tzadi Kuf, Reish Shin Tov. Yeah, that's 22. So therefore, all 22 letters. The Bekilel and Bishmona, but curse them with 8, me V'im B'chukosai Tim Asu, ad Ve'es Chukosai Gola Nafshom. So from Vav to Mem, which is Vav, Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud, Chaf, Lamed, Mem, which is 8. The Ilu Moshe Rabbeinu fakert, Berchon B'shmone, blessed the Yidden with 8, V'killam B'esem V'shtayim, and cursed them with 22. Berchon B'shmone, blessed them with 8, Mi Ve'ayayim Shamoy Tishma Ve'ad Le'avdom. Okay, so from Vav to Mem, which is 8. V'killam B'esem V'shtayim, Mi Ve'ayayim Lo Sishma Ad Ve'in Koneh, so from Vav till Hey. Again, all 22 letters of the alphabet. Cheve, that was that Peiches, also a chunk of Pei Zayin of Mesechta BavaBasra. Hope you enjoy. Peace out.